Benno, I will say welcome to everyone today and thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. My name is Tom Ungroat. I'm gift and decor industry veteran and a former board member of Atlanta's America's Mart and a growth Sherpa at Realign. And I will be emceeing the event webinar today.
And my name is Benno Dunkelsbühler. I am Chief Sherpa and CEO of Realign, a business expansion agency I founded 10 years ago. In a typical day, we work with a select few owners and executives, similar to many of you participating on today's webinar, who are looking to achieve faster growth. We've developed a secret sauce that delivers just that. So today we'll talk about a unique approach to growth, what we call the third growth option, which we're pretty excited about because we have seen this approach time and again work faster than organic growth and less risky than acquisition.
The purpose today of this webinar is to help you consider if a faster and less risky way to expand your market footprint might work for your company. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. As I asked someone a little earlier, now's the time to make sure you're muted. And if you have questions, please type them into the chat box and we can answer them as we move forward, or if we don't get to it, we will certainly take questions at the end. There will be no audio other than Benno and myself as we work our way through the webinar today. Today's the first of a 4-part webinar series. In each session, we're going to share insights to the growth methods, and final 3 webinars will focus on extensive case studies that have shown tremendous value that we can deliver in the approach. We'll begin with a look at where you are, and then we'll dive into describing the growth option components. We'll walk through what's a Sherpa. We'll define the third growth option, teach you the 3 process optimizers that make the third growth option most effective, then a real-world example of this model, followed by the first step to unlock this approach, the growth evaluation, and then have time at the end to answer your questions, of course. The fundamental goal of today's webinar is to teach you a growth approach that is faster and less risky. Future webinars will share more in-depth examples of the different types of expansions. Webinar 2 will take you through detailed case studies where we created growth by building new categories. Webinar 3 will take you through studies where we build new channels. And webinar 4 will walk you through growth core channels with a better go-to market process.
All right, thank you, Tom. So it's Benno again. And before we start really diving into sharing our ideas, I think it would help you in sort of this learning process to get the most out of the webinar if you just take a minute positioning in your mind where your business is. Is your challenge to create growth or to manage growth? Your growth option is a super effective tool in your toolbox either way, but if you want to create growth, which may require closing that strategy gap between the sales strategy and the operational strategy, maybe also between sales and finance, you're going to love the contents of this webinar. If, on the other hand, your challenge, you're already growing very fast, maybe too fast, and your challenge is managing growth, chances are you're already applying resources to close those strategy gaps, and you're likely already improving communication internally. How else in a high growth situation could the shipping department keep up with the sales department, right? Here too, the third growth option can help you to continue growing without taking your team's eyes off the ball for the core business. So on the left side of the slide here is a company in a slow growth, create growth mode. These are actual numbers we pulled from a confidential client case before they utilized the third growth option. when they were kind of stuck, not really sure if they wanted to grow by building a new category or grow by expanding into a new channel, or maybe just to improve their go-to-market process to sell more of the core categories in the core channel. But either way, the top and bottom line were stagnating and actually declining. On the right side is the same company after they kicked into a fast growth mode where managing growth became the biggest challenge after the third growth option had launched. So this company chose to continue selling their core categories and core channels of distribution, but just with a lot more volume, but by defining and executing a significantly improved go-to-market process. This process took this factory and distributor from $12 million, being kind of stuck at $12 million of revenue, as you can see on the left side of the slide, to $26 million worth of revenue commitments by the third year. The company value pivoted from heading south on the left side, where it was heading below the $3 million line, to growing north, approaching and soon surpassing the $7 million line. And that was even before addressing additional margin issues and other growing pains that they were, but they're now positioned to grow to 30 million top line, and with a 6x multiple valuation method, they would more than double their current higher valuation to closer to $18 million. So in the last few slides, we just kind of set the stage for the webinar. And our goal here is to share a growth method that is faster and less risky for you. And you clarified in your own mind whether your main challenge is to create growth or manage growth, or maybe a combination of both. Now, let me, please allow me to just introduce myself a little bit. I won't bore you with all of my life's milestones or why I worked in the home and gift industry for 3 decades. Instead, I'd just like to introduce myself through a few concepts I came across that kind of shaped the way that I think about growth and about the third growth option as I applied it. The main problem that we solve is that even the most talented of executives cannot run a business and build a business at the same time with the same resources. Now that seems like a simple realization, but unsolved, we have all seen this can be a real stumbling block to growth. I was born and schooled overseas. I had watched my father crash from financial success in the early 1970s to being pretty painfully stuck without revenue generating clients. I think that shaped me more than anything. It created a hunger and a passion for finding and serving clients. When I was 16, my dad uprooted us from Germany to a farm in America, 12 miles from the next traffic light in upstate New York. And he got unstuck and learned to create and sell a premium priced, happened to be an organic product, 240 miles southeast of the farm to 5-star restaurants in Manhattan. Now, I'm just sharing this story because I bet each and every one of us on this webinar have felt stuck in our business at different times. And I believe we can only grow when we face that reality. If we're stuck, we must face the need to get unstuck before we can grow. So my journey to America as a teenager helped me visualize the difference between stuck and no growth, and unstuck with a passion for delivering extraordinary value for clients. I believe there are conservative mindsets and growth mindsets. I have tremendous respect for the first one. It's good to conserve resources, for example, right? But I am personally passionate about the second, this growth mindset. Just like my dad showed me how to take an abandoned dairy farm in upstate New York and turn it into a growing organic venison business, I learned to add millions of dollars to clients' businesses with this third growth option. So as you think about the third growth option in your business, make sure that this growth initiative is being led by somebody with a growth mindset. Just to finish my personal introduction quickly, I learned the ropes as a merchant and marketer at IKEA and Pottery Barn in the first decade of my career, and then corporate rebel to head merchant and CEO of private equity owned businesses until I started my own growth agency in 2009. And then I traveled extensively, both to trend hotspots like London and Paris in search of new product ideas, and Asia and Europe to develop factory relationships. I started to take on turnaround challenges of mid-sized distributors working with private equity-owned companies. Got to travel all over the U.S. and 35 different countries on 4 continents, and worked on factory floors in China and Mexico and India for long stretches of time, if that's what it took. And just as my story has always been about growing and expanding horizons, it's also been about collaborating with others to help owners and executives of mid-sized companies expand the market footprint. And to me, collaboration is an essential part of this third growth option. Tom?
So let's get to the heart of everything here. What is a Sherpa? And how can they help you grow? What's the third growth option? Let's review the 3 process optimizers to enhance the growth option. We'll present a case study, the growth option evaluation as a first step, and we'll have time at the end, of course, for Q&A. Think of Sherpas as native experts in their own local areas. Guide teams of climbers who help you reach an unobtainable summit. Now you might have a Sherpa on your team, or maybe this list helps you to find a Sherpa that can help you expand your market footprint. We work with many Sherpas, so we can surely help you identify your own. A qualified Sherpa, one who can help you add millions of dollars in growth, is someone who has 15 to 30 plus years of experience, usually a senior executive role that demonstrated ownership mentality, which is key to removing barriers that are always part of growing from zero to something. You want a Sherpa with experience in marketing or operations, sales management, or general management. We look for people authentic, collaborative, and push for visibility so all parties can keep up. Moreover, a good Sherpa is someone who possesses hunger, persistence, and grit, curiosity even under pressure. Someone who is resourceful, who has a never say die work ethic. A Sherpa is someone who thrives on change and challenge, who prefers to work independently and is equally comfortable in a team environment where he or she influences others and outcomes. The responsibilities of Sherpas are: 1, to take action and to create strategies to expand a company's market footprint without waiting for guidance, and 2, to facilitate meetings and engage the stakeholders, and ultimately the person has to be able to multitask and execute. In other words, get it done. I hope this gives you a clear image of what and who a Sherpa is, so you can recognize one of them when you see one. You have a Sherpa on your team already, or we'll be happy to help you find one.
Great. So after you find a Sherpa, you'll want to clarify with them, how would you like to grow your business? And that's the core of today's webinar, right? This third growth option. We're taught to think of growth as in a binary choice between organic growth and acquisition. So the first option, internal organic growth, it's really about running and optimizing the business. You and your management team are focused on optimizing the product, making it, processing the order, delivering the service, or shipping the goods. There may be organic growth potential in optimizing your business with your core team, but internal organic growth is definitely different from the second option, which is acquisition, right? And option 2 is about acquiring access to markets or capabilities, making sure you paid the right price for this acquisition and can then integrate it into your overall business to make it work. These two options are different from the third growth option. That's here we're talking about building either new channels or new categories, or a better go-to-market process for your existing core categories or channels. It's about doing so without taking your eyes and your team's eyes off the core business. The third growth option is a solution for this age-old problem that I mentioned earlier a couple more times in this webinar, that even the most effective executives cannot run a business and build a business at the same time with the same resources. Each of these options are different, but now let's spend some time and dig deeply into how to optimize the third growth option process. We'll focus on the 3 most important process optimizers. Sorry about that.
The first process. Hopefully everybody's got it on mute out there.
That was
first. The first process optimizers: define, refine, scale the approach. It's a helpful way to look at growth projects. It's important that you focus on all 3. They say over 80% of the startups fail within the first 5 years. We've all heard that. That's probably also true for internal startups. Why? Because executives do only one or two of these 3 things right. They usually don't define the business opportunity well enough, or they just throw stuff against the wall and see what happens. Or they spend too much time defining, then fall in love with my way and don't leave room to refine. Ideally, you define a project about 80% of the way and 20% for flexibility. Finally, executives sometimes struggle how to transition or scale from a startup to a $1 million company, 10 or 25 million. The old adage, what you got here, you ain't going to get there, reminds us we need the right tools and the processes for each milestone.
So here's what we're talking about, right? When define, refine, scale, and in the defining, we really want to define the opportunities. We want to define the external markets, the internal capabilities, the project goals, and we want to do these things. We want to define, don't try to define it 100%. That'll take 10 years and the opportunity will have come and gone, but try to define it 80% of the way, which will, in my experience, usually take weeks or months, not days, not years, but some weeks or months. Define the opportunity, and then refine it, test it, get it out there, ask people. As I like to say, I like to ask people smarter than me. That might be the customer. That might be the guy or gal at the loading dock. Let's test it, get feedback, and then test it again and get feedback. And in the scaling part, you want to use the right tools for each phase. When you go from 0 to $1 million, the tools might be a number 2 pencil and a legal pad and a calculator. To get from $1 million to $5 million, it's probably going to require an Excel sheet, maybe even with pivot tables. And then when you're trying to get something from $5 to $25 million, you'll probably need software or an ERP system or MRP type of technology. But if you use too much if you use the technology required for a $20 million business in the startup, it'll choke it. So you want to use the scaling is about using the right tools for each phase, and then ultimately this third growth option, if you're building let's say you're $10 million company and you use it to add another $10 million business, at some point you're going to have to either incorporate it into your core business, or you might spin it off and sell it to somebody else. But usually, people incorporate it into their core business. So it's all about execution. Growth really requires innovation, of course, but ultimately this process is really at the intersection of innovation and execution. And my favorite Thomas Edison quote about execution is, "Vision without execution is hallucination." So, second process optimizer, you need to be very intentional about the combination of new or core you want to pursue. This 2/2, these 4 quadrants on the slide here. The top row is about new channels. The right column, the column on the right side is about new categories. So if you pick a new business idea that is a new category and a new channel, that's the top right-hand corner. Bottom left-hand corner, you're staying in the core category and the core channels, maybe just with an improved go-to-market process, and the remaining 2 quadrants are either core new or new core. So first, you have to know in which quadrant you want to play. And then what does that mean for growth? So many executives think the more they're relying on growing the core, the more they ought to be able to rely on their own team for growth. For example, if growth is to come from the bottom left quadrant, they think their current VP of sales or VP of product ought to be able to get them big growth. I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think primarily this is a question of bandwidth. How much change management is required for this to be successful? I have seen an outside team of Sherpas may be required to execute growth, even in that bottom left core scenario. And if not an outside team of Sherpas, maybe an inside but separate team of Sherpas. If your current team is fully engaged in running your business and protecting the core, they may just not have the bandwidth, again, without taking the eye off the core business, to devote to building and executing a better go-to-market process for the core business. And much less if you ask them to build and optimize a new category and or a new channel. So growth requires bandwidth to devote to any of these 4 quadrants. And the third growth option, process optimizers and approach, really supplies that needed bandwidth. And then finally, the third process optimizer is, after you organize the growth initiative using the define, refine, scale optimizer, and then optimize new versus core channels and category opportunities. Now you want to put your growth idea through these paces. Put them through these 3 paces, what I call the SEE approach. First, how big is the opportunity? What size is the market? How easy or hard is it to enter this market if you're entering a new channel or category? And how easy or hard is it to execute? Now, big is not always better than small, especially if you can dominate in a small niche market, right? If you can have 50% market share in a $10 million market, that can be very interesting. Might be better than having 0.1% no market, hardly any market share in a huge market. And easy for you, easy to enter or easy to execute for you may be hard for others. So it's really important for you to think about the growth opportunity through this lens. These 3 questions that I think will help you prioritize different growth opportunities. Okay, so we talked through what's a Sherpa, defined the third growth option, and talked through the three growth optimizers. I think let's just look at an example, a case study. So this was a Midwestern happened to be lighting distributor, my first big client in 2010. They're the number one player in their market. And when you're number one, you cannot grow unless the market grows. And after the Great Recession, back in 2010, the market was not growing. So they had hit a growth ceiling. They had lots of ideas around a new category. One specific new category, actually. They thought, just let's hire a product manager who knows that product category. They thought that was the solution. But in fact, there was no product strategy yet. There was no pipeline of products. There was no sourcing base. No factories had been identified yet to make that new category. So I believed then and believe today that it was just too early to hire a new product manager. So here's how we applied the third growth option in this example. In year one, the Sherpa did a competitive analysis, went into different retail stores, looked at the product category, and really mapped out the market. The Sherpa looked for a gap in the market in terms of style, function, and price, and then built a market inside that gap. Then he looked for suppliers, factories that could fill that gap, put together a test assortment, worked with the sales team to get them comfortable with product knowledge. Remember, the sales team was all about new lighting like the back of their hands, but this new product category required additional product training. And that product training helped a lot with the buy-in, of course. So sales support was very important. And lo and behold, in the first year, we went from $0 to $3 million in new revenue. In the second year, there was a need to develop product 2.0 and 3.0, right? What have you done for me lately? A salesperson never said to a product person. We needed to add factories to make sure supply would match the new demand. And we needed to add Sherpas so the work could get done in a timely manner. Because we were pushing to reach $10 million in new revenues in the second year. Now, that was sort of a big, hairy, audacious goal that also created serious momentum. And lack of momentum is really dangerous in the third growth option. If you lose the owner's patience, that's a significant risk that must be managed and overcome for this third growth option to work. And we almost didn't reach that magical 8-figure number, but both the Sherpa moved heaven and earth, and the CEO and other key executives did whatever it took. And we reached that psychological tipping point of $10 million of revenue in the second year. And in the third year, it was a different set of challenges again. Now, the CFO was nervous about uncontrolled growth, SKU proliferation, cash flow constraints of a high growth business. Right? CFOs tend to like consistent, predictable growth. Growing from 0 to 10 million in 2 years and then wanting to double it again in the third year was exciting, but not exactly what a CFO would call consistent or predictable. So the Sherpa qualities that we described earlier, this expertise of an industry veteran, grit, persistence, became really key in this case study. The Sherpa's ability to champion the development of pipeline visibility reports and routines that aligned the salespeople with the inventory folks and the CFO became key to pushing through those challenges and then reaching an even bigger milestone in the third year. 3 years of consistently optimizing the process, championing the goal, and dedicating resources to build the business created a $26 million business in 3 years. That would have taken the core lighting team likely more than that, more than 3 years. And M&A, merger and acquisition folks probably would have proposed paying some $15 or $20 million to get a $26 million revenue business versus building it through the third growth option process at a fraction of that cost. So how do you start? How do you convince your boss, which might be the bank, might be the CEO, might be the board of directors, that the third growth option idea can work? You need to invest time to look at your business through this customer-centric lens of this pyramid model that that's up on the screen. What's the value proposition? What market are you operating in? Look at your tactics and processes that translate the value proposition into sales tools, which then sell to your market. So that's the basis of what we of how we look at the growth evaluation. You need to invest about a week's time over a month or so. Half of that time, just a couple days to ask questions, learn, review information, look, listen, and learn. And then, you're asking 40 plus questions around the core business, the products, the employees, processes, bottlenecks, financial metrics, et cetera, et cetera. And then you need to take a couple days to write down your conclusions, to think about, write down, organize the information. And I recommend presenting it to the stakeholders in 3 different parts. First, you got to describe the situation. What is an assessment of the current situation? If the stakeholders see the situation differently, they're not going to be aligned around how to grow. So assessing the current situation is very important for alignment. And then secondly, you need to really define the growth opportunity. And I think the most important part of defining the growth opportunity, whether that's a new category or a new channel or a better go-to-market process for existing category and channel, the most important part is you need to dare to name the revenue goal. And don't just say, oh yeah, it's $1 billion market, and if all we had would, 1% of $1 billion, that would be woohoo. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about define and scope the revenue opportunity in enough detail that a banker would be convinced that, oh yeah, I can see how with an average order size of X and with these many clients and cycle times being what they are and conversion rates being what they are, I think we could get to $5 million within 2 years or whatever the number is. In my experience, the growth opportunity, this third growth option works really well if the growth opportunity is at least $2 or $3 million worth of new revenue within 2 years. And then the third part of the growth evaluation is you need to define the execution steps. Describe all the W's, right? The W's are the who, what, when, where, how are things going to get done. So the growth evaluation is an integral part to kicking off a growth evaluation to make sure everybody has an understanding of what the opportunity is and how to get there. Tom?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to certainly thank International Market Center for sponsoring this webinar series. And thanks, Benno, for taking us kind of behind the scenes and see how the third growth option works. You remember over in the chat section, you can type in some questions, and we have a few. And please go ahead and do that. And I'd like to read a couple of these questions, if I could, Benno, and let us know what you think. I have a possible Sherpa on my team. Fits a lot of the description you mentioned, but different in age and experience. How stringent is your definition?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the description that we gave, that held true in the vast majority of our projects. But there are obviously exceptions to any rule, and so the answer is it really depends, and you'll be able to describe the ideal Sherpa for your project, for your growth project, after you did the growth evaluation, after you describe the activities needed to build the new revenue stream. That's when you'll know that, well, maybe I don't need somebody with 15 or 25 years of experience. Maybe this 28-year-old person that does not have 15 years of experience can get the job done. I've seen that work as well.
Great. Another question's popped up, Benno. We tried to expand into a new category, and it was a failure. Do you have any watch outs?
Don't wing it, right? Don't be really intentional about these process optimizers. Be really intentional about writing the growth evaluation. Don't just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks.
Another, my total revenues are under 2 million. So my third growth option idea might be worth 500,000 in 2 years, less than you recommended, a minimum of 2 to 3 million in new revenues. What do you think?
Well, it can work if you're if the opportunity, if you have a $500,000 growth opportunity, it could possibly work as long as fewer resources for a smaller opportunity can still create the desired result, right? The reason I said, an opportunity should be worth at least 2 or 3 million within 2 years, and we've seen it be as much as, the case study was $10 million within 2 years, is because it gives you a little bit more resources to invest into it, but it might work with smaller as well.
This is an interesting question. A couple more. What's the biggest failure of the third growth option project Realign has been involved in? We all have them.
Yeah, I can't say that every single time, we added, we went from 0 to $26 million in 3 years. I'd probably be having this call from the Bahamas if it did. But so we've had scenarios over the years where a client had to drastically reduce resources sort of midstream, and then they said, yeah, we got it from here. We'll just do it ourselves without Sherpas. We'll just have the core team, and that can work sometimes for a while, but I've also seen that not work, and in the end, it just, again, it comes down to the fact that even the most effective executives cannot run a business and build a business at the same time with the same resources, and the third growth option just offers a solution to that problem.
We're going to wind it up here. We have one more question. Your example was in the consumer segment. Can this work in the industrial markets or other industry segments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the approach is really industry agnostic, right? But Sherpas are not, right? And if a couple of years ago we did a project in the candle with a candle factory. Now, that's sort of, my background is in home and gift and decor products, but I did not have deep knowledge in candles. So I brought an industry veteran from the candle industry as a Sherpa into that team, and we were able to do amazing things together. So it can work in any segment or in any industry vertical, but you need to bring the right people in.
Well, that's all the questions we have. Benno, would you like to conclude?
Yeah, so we set up the dates for the next 3 webinars. So I'd like you to just block your calendars here for webinars 2, 3, and 4. We're pretty excited about sharing. The vast majority of each of those webinars will be about specific case studies that have created over $40 million worth of new revenue. Either in, we'll have a couple of new category case studies in webinar 2, new channel case studies in webinar 3, and core business, but new go-to-market case studies in webinar 4. So thank you very much for attending the webinar. We'll send invites for the balance of the webinar series over the next several months here. And in the meantime, I'd like to invite you, the first 5 webinar participants who call or email, to schedule some time to explore how this concept might create growth for you or help to manage growth for your company will receive a free 1-hour phone or video call session to kind of kick the tires specifically for your business. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. See you at the next webinar.